just so honored to be here. And thank you to all of you who have taken time out of your very busy day to be here and make time and space for yourself. And today, I think that my talk will probably align with you if you are a person who recognizes just how important self-care is. There's a lot of discussion about it, but what I am really striving for, and what I talked about partly in my recent TED Talk, was the power of saying me first and how critical self-care is, really not just for us personally, but also for our professional success. And sometimes it is the first thing to go as we're striving for success in our careers. So before I get started, I have to just disclose that I do work for the Baylor Scott and White system in Texas, and they are very generous in letting me speak outside of the organization, with the important point that I make the disclaimer that anything I say does not represent the opinions of Baylor Scott and White and is certainly not intended to be medical advice. But I think that you will very quickly see that the content that I'm providing you today is intended to help you see and help you make those really mental clicks to help you move to a place where it's imperative that you start prioritizing yourself. We see it all the time, all over in social media and blogs and content. Self-care is not selfish, and health is wealth, and those are all the things that I say too. But somehow it's getting lost, and we are not really following through with that. So why is that? Well, I think a very important reason for this is oftentimes we are trying to separate our personal life from our professional life. And I believe that this is a very big mistake. We are one person, and there are these different aspects of our life. And trying to separate them is virtually impossible when we're talking about one human being. And for that reason, I think we often fall into this trap of self-neglect because we show up in our professional lives and we put everything else on the back burner. We try to believe that we have to be this perfect, polished version of ourselves. And if we're any less than that, if we show any sign of weakness, if we demonstrate the need to take a break for ourselves, then somehow we in our minds start believing that somehow we might not be as good as the next doctor. We might not be as qualified as the other attorney. And we might have this vision that somehow we're failing ourselves, when in reality, the way to become that best version of yourself is to focus on these pieces of you that really need your attention. Throughout our journey, we often compare ourselves to others, and this is how we fall into the trap. We fall into the trap thinking, I will be happy when, that age-old fallacy. I'll be happy when I graduate from medical school, when I have this successful career, when I get the promotion, when I get married, when I have kids, when I have the house, the car, the yacht. And we all know that no matter how many material things we have, we're never happy. However, when we look at other people and we start comparing ourselves, then we tend to forget about the amazing stuff we have. And then we start striving for these other things. We accomplish them. And in doing so, that's the big discovery. Wow, I have this. I thought I would be happy. And somehow I'm not feeling that happiness I thought I would have. What I've discovered through my burnout journey, because I've gone through burnout 3 times. That means I'm a triple certified burnout expert by experience. What I have discovered that is along the way, as I was checking off the boxes for all these things that I really wanted to accomplish that were goals, I was also checking off other boxes. And those other boxes were the boxes that came along with the success. I got the promotion, so I had to work more hours to prove myself. I have the family, and I was suddenly spreading myself very thin and not creating the space for myself. I purchased the bigger house, and then I had to work harder and make more money to pay for it. So all of those things that were goals of mine, they led to other things where I was not in full alignment with my values. And this is where we often make mistakes, because then we start to sacrifice the things that we know in our heart are so critically important for our success. One of the things that I said on my recent TED Talk, which I firmly believe, is success at the expense of your health and well being isn't success at all. So, why does success not feel so successful? Or why are we often unhappy and burnt out? And the answer is because we are not living in alignment with what we feel is important. Life isn't happening the way we thought it was going to be once we got there. Now, one of the things that I think we all do is we reflect when something huge happens, when something devastating, when something rocks our world, then we take the time to stop and reflect and think about it. When 9/11 happened, when the war in Ukraine started, when COVID hit and thousands of people were dying, we all probably took a moment to stop and think about our life. And my goodness, life is so short. Is this really all there is to life? Is my life really going to be like this, where I'm working all day and I'm taking no time for myself? And all of these things go through our mind when something huge and devastating happens. And that has been the case for me. But I'm going to challenge each and every one of you today to ask yourself if you are living by your values and not wait until something devastating happens. And that devastation can be something huge, or it can be something huge, small for the world, but huge for you, like losing a loved one. And this was really brought into perspective for me this week. On Monday, I was celebrating my 13-year anniversary. And my husband and I decided that we were going to do something very different this year. We were going to take our children with us to dinner and have a wonderful, fancy meal, let them experience it, and let them just see our love and feel it as a family. And so I have 10-year-old twin daughters and a 6-year-old boy. So my 3 kids were with us. And we were sitting there at dinner. And halfway through the dinner, I look up and I see a big group of people. I didn't really think anything of it because it's kind of by the bar area in the restaurant. And I keep eating and keep talking. And then a little bit later, I look up and there seems to be more commotion. And I realize somebody's on the ground. So immediately I get up, I walk over there, and I said, I'm a doctor. Is there anything I can do to help? And immediately the seas parted and everybody was panicking. Nothing was being done. And they said, she choked and she's not breathing now. And I looked down and she was completely unconscious. And after trying to do some abdominal thrusts and trying to dislodge whatever it was that she choked on and not being successful, I had to start CPR. And I was the only person in that restaurant doing CPR as everybody was standing there terrified. And eventually another woman came up and started helping, and another man came up and paramedics arrived. And as I walk back to my family, I just see the look in my children's eyes, and it still gives me chills. I see my husband standing there in disbelief with our children and just kind of holding them. And I realized in that moment, this was a learning lesson for my children. And this was a learning lesson for all of us. And so after some time, we went outside as a family as they finished and the paramedics took the women away. And we sat and reflected and we talked, and I answered all their questions, and they had so many questions. And we prayed for that woman. And we had some reflections as a family about how precious life was and why it was important to live each day to its fullest, and why it's important to forgive and love and live our values. And those are things that we speak about every day. And so it was something amazing to hear my kids sharing back their reflections in a moment which was very scary for them, but them realizing, wow, life really is short. So we don't want to wait for that. We don't really want to wait for that moment. Why I'm telling you this story, yes. Okay, I thought I heard someone trying to speak. Why I'm telling you this story is because this was the very first time in my entire life that I was able to reflect and realize I am actually living by my values. I didn't have thoughts about, I really need to change this. I need to be doing something differently. And I really should be spending more time with my family. This was the first time that I felt that I was truly living by my values. But it was really hard work to get there. It took a lot of daily practice, and it took me going through burnout 3 times. When we think about this and we think about living our values, how do we live our values? How can we get to the point where I'm saying, no, I have to put me first and these things that are important to me? Well, number one, we can't really compare ourselves to other people because the things that we hold valuable are very different for different people. And I believe what's called person-centered wellness. And what I mean by that is we're all very unique and different individuals. We all have different experiences with our careers, with our environment, with our friendships, with our family, with our physical health, our environment, our social, our spiritual. All of this is part of us as a human being. And if we try to separate that out and we try to put on a picture of what represents strength to somebody else while neglecting what's important for us, then we're not going to reach that point where we're really going to thrive as an individual. So, for you as an individual to thrive in your professional career, I believe it's critically important to say me first. So, how does that look? What does that look like to you? It's going to be different. I can tell you that my priorities have changed multiple times over. Sometimes my career and my work, I do have to put more focus there, and I have to put the exercise a little bit on the back burner. Maybe I only work out 2 times that week instead of 5. Or maybe I don't have time for seeing my friends in any given week. Or maybe I don't do some of the things that are very important because I have to prioritize something else. But always keeping in mind that we have to circle back to our values and reassess how we're doing and make sure that not too much time has gotten away from us. That means being conscious as we're on this road. So I like to use analogies because I feel like they're very helpful. And if we think of a construction of a new roadway, how many times have we been driving on the highway and we've seen a new road being built? And we know that they probably did a survey to make sure the ground was structurally sound. And then we see them kind of compacting the soil, leveling it, and they put these wire things out. They lay some cement and concrete, and they do all of these things to build the road. If they had just went out there and laid the cement, it would crumble. And so the same thing applies to us as individuals and human beings. If we are building the foundation as we reach for success in our careers, this is when we will have the ultimate success because we'll be more equipped to handle the stresses of life. We'll be more equipped to handle the curveballs that come our way. And oftentimes that doesn't happen because we weren't conscious of the road on the way to reaching our goals. So even after reaching your goals, the same lousy habits will continue if we allow them to. It doesn't change suddenly. We think that once we reach that point, that I will slow down and I'll prioritize myself and I'll get better about exercise. But in reality, the same lousy habits continue and we fill the space with the stress and the things that we're accustomed to doing. So we have to ask ourselves, is life on repeat? And is it on repeat doing the wrong things that we know are more harmful to us and not helping us? Einstein has said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And certainly we as human beings do this because our brains are conditioned by society and by our upbringing and by what was fed to us and our understanding. And one day we reach this point where we realize that might not be true. And some of the things that very well-intentioned people taught us, we realize are not true at all. Now, this is hard. How do we make the shift? This is the million-dollar question, right? If we really believed that stopping and prioritizing sleep and prioritizing exercise could lead to career success, then it would be a no-brainer. But what happens is our mind offers us thoughts like, it's just much harder for me than other people, and maybe I'm not as good as them, and I'm not as smart as them. And then we start thinking, nobody understands. It's so much harder for me, and my situation is different. And these are all the things I have said. You don't understand. It's different. It's different for me. And if we try to talk to people outside of our industry, we'll hear things like, wow, sounds like a first world problem, or you get paid the big bucks. I'm not feeling sorry for you. You knew what you signed up for. And in time, what happened to me was I started repeating those things to myself, and I started believing them. I started saying, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't be complaining, or it could be worse, or I should be thankful for this, or yes, it is a first world problem. And we start to devalue the things that we know inherently we should be focusing on. So if that has happened to you and someone has popped in and said, you know what, you just need to breathe and do yoga or exercise, and you have done what I have and said, you don't understand, it's not that easy, then I can sympathize with you and understand where you're coming from. But I want to caution you with the mistake that I made and believing that the only real solution is to leave our job. I thought leaving clinical medicine was the only answer. And I was absolutely wrong, because when I hit burnout the third time, it was in a non clinical role where I was blessed to have a good schedule. I was using my doctor brain. I didn't have all the stress, but I continued the same bad habits that led to the burnout and the stress all over again. And this is when I really realized I have to change what I'm doing, and I have to say, me first. I have to prioritize my self care, because I'm going to lose my entire livelihood. This isn't working for me. So if you're experiencing burnout, or you're on the verge of it, or you're unhappy with life, I want you to realize that leaving your job might be the answer, but the vast majority of the time, it's not. With the Great Resignation, a recent publication said that 80% of people who quit their job during the Great Resignation regretted it. And I'm not surprised, because I've done that. And I know I continued the same lousy things that led me there in the first place. So if you're feeling all alone, or you're looking at someone like me and saying, wow, she has it all together, she's an amazing speaker and podcaster, and she's done these TED Talks, I want you to know it took me hitting rock bottom and crashing and burning and literally just wanting to give up medicine altogether before I was able to make this change. And that's why I share my story, because when you're in the middle of it, you're in a fog and you can't see it. And it feels like a ton of bricks weighing on you, and you feel like there's just no choice. And the first steps are the hardest. And it's recognizing what is driving your actions. Look at yourself. What are the fears that you have, the stories that your brain is offering you, why you have no choice? For me, it took a lot of coaching to figure out. When I discovered the world of coaching, I feel like my life changed forever. And it's not the same for everybody. You might not like coaching. You might not have tried it. You might think it's crazy. Maybe a therapist or a physician or an online network or a support group for whatever it is you're going through. It's different for all of us. And it's important for us to stop and reflect and figure out what it is that we need as human beings. But the one important thing I'll say is, if we continue the same actions, we're going to get the same results, or at least something that rhymes with it, and we'll continue the self-neglect on repeat. So I challenge you, whether it's, any part of your life, figure out what it is that you're the most unhappy with. Maybe it's your physical health. Maybe it's your relationships, maybe it's your spiritual. I want you to stop and reflect about those things and ask yourself, what do I really want? And total wellness is just, it's not just physical. And we make that mistake. It's not just mental. It's not just emotional. It's all of these things. So for you as an individual, it's important to figure out what it is that you need and ask yourself why you're not doing those. What am I afraid of? And what's my life going to look like if I continue this 10 years from now? And is this what I want for myself? So, figuring out our personal values will help us. And when we stop and reflect, we start to make the little shifts. And it's a daily reflection, it's a daily practice. It's not something we can do one time and it clicks. But slowly in time, we start to see things differently. We start to see things more objectively. And all of a sudden, the things that didn't make sense start to make sense. And we start to realize that we have a choice. And this is when we can really show up in our professional careers and really succeed. This is when we're happy, we're vibrant, we have amazing ideas, we're energetic, and we do more in less time, and we have better success. So putting ourselves in the back burner is not the answer. It's actually the key to our professional success. When we prioritize our essential needs as we define them, not as anybody else define them, as we define them, we become a much more powerful version of ourselves. It's a paradoxical outcome. And again, it takes reflection and figuring that out what you need. It's all about filling your tank. And different tanks use different kinds of fuel. It could be gasoline, it could be kerosene, it could be diesel fuel, whatever it is for you to re-energize and get to where you need in a place of wellness for you. And again, it's going to be different, but pushing through is never the answer. We have to take those breaks because we are more equipped to handle all the things we need to do when we do that. And that's when we truly shine. So if I could leave you with anything today, I would say that the self-reflection is important. And if you realize I have poor physical health or poor energy or poor emotional well-being, we have to realize that is not going to equal long-term success. And if we want the long-term success, prioritizing that is going to be the key to actually making that happen. And we're going to have the limiting beliefs. We're going to have the things that are in the back of our mind that tell us, look, I don't have a choice. This doesn't apply to me. And, there's a lot of that we all go through. But doing it alone is very challenging. So I challenge you to find someone who can help you and support you and help you see things a little bit differently. It might be a podcast. It might be a blog that you're following. It might be a friend who calls you out and lets you know when you're seeing things in a very skewed perspective. But whatever it is that you do, it needs to be aligned with your values. And then you can really thrive and have the career success you're really wanting. So thank you for your time today. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I will.
Dr. Aguirre, we do have one question coming through on social media.
Okay.
So, actually, there's two. I'm going to try to fit them both in real quick.
Okay.
The first one is, there are so many hours in a day. Do you have any suggestions for time management if you are already prioritizing?
Oh, yes. This is such a great question. Thank you to whoever asked this. Okay. For us to be able to squeeze more in the same amount of time is challenging. So, what I recommend is learning to say no. How many times do we say yes to things that we don't want to do? For us to create the space for the things that are important to us, that we value most, we have to learn to set boundaries and say no to the things that we do not value. Volunteering at your kid's school because you want to be the mom that has the best cupcakes and does all that, if that's of value to you and that brings you happiness, great, do it. But if you do it because you're comparing yourself to the other moms and you think I'm going to look like a bad mom, that's not a good reason. And that's not going to bring you long-term happiness. So saying no to the things that are not of value to you allows you to create space for the things that are. Great question.
Awesome. Okay. The other one is, Any suggestions for stress management specifically?
So, stress management specifically, it really goes back to saying me first. When we are not able or equipped to handle stress is because we don't have reserve. When I'm exhausted, when I'm hungry, when I haven't been fueling my body, when I haven't taken a break for myself, it is incredibly challenging to handle the stress. We have no reserve. So, stress management all goes back to prioritizing yourself. I have to get my sleep if I'm going to be able to think clearly and address a situation that comes up. I have to stop and eat if I'm going to be able to handle the next challenging patient I might have. If we don't do those things for ourselves, we're not equipped to handle the stress. Stress management is a direct reflection of your abilities to adapt. And when you're already on an empty tank, it's hard to push the the gas pedal. So yes, prioritizing your need. It might be sleep. It might be prioritizing meals. It might be just space to be alone. But that is the best thing you can do to handle the stress is give yourself the gasoline you need to be able to adapt.
Awesome. Okay. Dr. Liz Aguirre, where do we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on social media at Liz Aguirre MD. My website is lizaguirremd.com. If you're looking for a speaker for your event, I'm happy to help. Reach out to me. And yes, and I also, as you mentioned, I have the Creating Clarity podcast where I just kind of share some of my experiences and how I've evolved. So any of those platforms, I'm on Instagram.
I'm so glad to be here. I can't wait to start talking about this. Something it took me a while to figure out as well, just like Dr. Gary was just talking about. So I'd love to share my screen if I can do that. Give my slides a little
Hold
view.
on one second.
Sure.
Does that do it?
Let's see. Da, da, da. Yes.
Awesome.
There we go. Hit play. Here we go. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about having a happy little practice for health and wellness professionals, specifically maybe something a little bit different than what you've heard in marketing, which is creating a tiny but mighty boutique business in less than full-time hours, ideally 25 hours a week. And I'll share more about how I do that. But my promise in our short time together is that I want to take some time to really define what tiny but mighty really means for a wellness or health professional, where people go wrong when they want to kind of zig where others are zagging, specifically what to avoid, how you can begin to focus your ideas in a tiny but mighty way, and of course, a quick start plan, and I'll share how you can learn more for free, of course. I'm going to leave time at the end for some questions, so please jot things down if things come to mind, and I'll be happy to pitch in. So, all right, let's talk about the first thing, defining a tiny but mighty business. Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. Go big or go home. If you are on the receiving end of any marketing wisdom whatsoever, you probably have seen a lot of entrepreneurial talk about one vision of success. It's the vision of success that you see influencers have on Instagram, on social media, all those success magazines and success books. It's the happy little practice approach to succeeding in your own private practice or a little business is the antidote to that. And the reason why I want to say antidote is, I used to think there was only one way to succeed. And while I won't go too much into my story here, I found that there is another way that's a little bit less loud, a bit quieter, and that it really suits some people. So let's kind of shine a light for a minute on what I mean by going big or going home. Going big is the infinite kind of never-ending chase of a large volume of likes, followers, and customers. It's trying to make mass appeal with your work, for everyone to like it, and to become a bit famous and be very, very rich. It's like the ultra capitalism dream, right? That is peddled in our country. And in Happy Little Practice, we kind of do it differently. We keep the big thinking that we've learned from mentors and our training of what's possible with our work, but also for our own lives, and actually go small, and we build small on purpose. And we do that using a boutique business model. And in short, a boutique business model is, instead of trying to make your money in your meaningful work through a massive volume of followers and customers, we have a smaller volume of clients and customers. We serve them supremely well, and we charge a premium for that high-level service. And so we don't need to seek fame, and we don't need to scale unless you really want to. And there's plenty of people who teach you that, but there's not a lot of people saying, hey, think big, but go small. It's really the antidote to that type of entrepreneurial thinking. So let's get into it. The essence of a tiny but mighty business is this. I call it lifestyle rich, which means we start with the end in mind. There's a reason why happy is in Happy Little Practice. What do you need in your life to be well, to think well, live well? And you work backwards from not only the finances of that. Well, everybody might be a little bit different. For some, it's multiple six figures or $1 million business. And for others, it's six figures or 50,000, right? Whatever it is, you get to decide. And so we work backwards from not only the financial perspective, but how do you, like, what would you define success on a feeling level, on the day-to-day level? And we work backwards from that. And then we have our business structure serve that vision. So that way we don't end up with this business that kind of runs our life instead of really funds our life and is a meaningful contribution to society. Another tenet of a tiny but mighty business is that we're a bit minimalist. So if our lifestyle, right, being lifestyle rich does not quite literally mean being, financially rich. Everybody's going to have a different perspective. And if you don't define that for yourself, society will define it for you. So one of the ways we execute that is we become minimalists in our business. We simplify everything. Listen, life is complex enough. There's enough crazy stuff going on in the world that we don't need complexity, at least unnecessary complexity. There's a lot of complexity probably in your work with your clients and customers. That's appropriate. But the actual structure of your business and how you work and how you market needs to be simple and doable, and to be able to withstand life's challenges, pandemics, snow days, extreme weather patterns. How can we stay in business when everything's kind of intense? We do that by having a minimalist business structure. And then the thing that really brings it all home is that we love simplicity. I always tell myself and my clients, I say, listen, I can't do complex because I have 2 kids at home, I have a marriage, I have lots of things going on like you, I'm sure. But I can do simple, and simple doesn't necessarily mean easy peasy, right? Like no success in any kind of private practice is really like a cakewalk, right? But if we keep it simple, we can make it doable. And what's doable, we can be consistent at. And in Happy Little Practice, consistency beats intensity day in and day out. I want to share just a quick snapshot of my life so you know where I'm coming from. What little or tiny, or I would like to say small, gets me is that I get to live where I want, do what I want, and work when I want. And I think that's one of the reasons why most of us wanted to work on our own terms and starting our own private practice or small business. So I live in the middle of nowhere in the country in upstate New York, right on the border of southern Vermont. I hang out in Vermont most of the time, right? That's me on the left there, looking weird with my hat on. And I do what I want. And, by that, I mean, like, here's a picture of the Alps. My family, my father lives in Switzerland. That's my daughter on the left there, and her great aunt on the right. And I want to be able to fund going there and keeping those connections with my Swiss relatives alive. And I want to work when I want, right? This is kind of my version of lifestyle rich. It's maybe completely unattractive to you. You may be a city person or something else, but I work when I want. And I work, for me, my 25 hours a week revolves around my children's schedule. And those are my two little monkeys right there. So I want you to be thinking, what's your version of lifestyle rich, and starting to reverse engineer that. Okay, so here is why, this kind of approach does work when you understand what really lifestyle rich means. Remember the reason why we create our own business and what the money is for. It isn't for hoarding. It isn't for, becoming famous. It's to live well and think well, and of course, do well, right? Not only in your work with your clients and your contribution to society, but in your own life. Like your wellness must be included within the structure of your business. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 ways that people you want to look out for when you want to go small, but really think big about your practice. Okay. The first thing is trying to be all things to all people. And most of us, when we go through our medical training or our holistic health training, we want to help everyone. It's in our DNA. But the result of that is that we kind of become a generalist and have too many different offers that we don't make sense to a whole lot of people. Or we find ourselves having to hustle and work and kind of reinvent our marketing and our services over and over again to try to be all things. And in Happy Little Practice, we specialize to get away from that, because if you're going to do things in about 25 hours a week, you can't be reinventing the wheel, even in your marketing. Okay. The other thing that we unintentionally do is to chase the big time, right? It's so easy to be kind of indoctrinated, conditioned to so many unimportant metrics, like likes and followers. These are less important than actually having conversations with real humans, and a portion of those conversations become your ideal clients and doing great, meaningful work, right? So trying to be all things to all people, it's exhausting. It creates a lot of repetitive, reinventing the wheel kind of work, and trying to have multiple little offers all over the place. Unintentionally chasing the big time. It's kind of, even my clients, we have to unlearn this and realize what are really the important metrics that you're going to care about, never mind what society tells you to care about. And that helps you become a bit more minimalistic and also get better results. And the other thing is we tend to charge too little, right? So most of the time we're starting with hourly work, and we're only being paid when we're working. And there's a limit to that, because we can only, if we're only getting paid when we're clocking in and clocking out, we've kind of replicated corporate culture in our own business. And one of the ways that we also do that is we compare our fees to bigger companies. Part of that comes from, the old school training of replicating, industrial revolution of if you're not big and, the most affordable and mass appeal, then you're not really relevant. But that's really out of date. When you compare your fees to a guru or a mega star in your industry or just a big company, what you may not see is that they're making their money on a large volume of sales. And most health and wellness professionals are not famous and do not have a huge following, or do not make their money on a very large volume of sales. And so when you're making your money on a huge volume of sales, you can afford to have a really low rate, or charge by the hour, or have one-off offerings or many different offerings. What you also don't see is the staff to pull that off. But when we're a company of one, and maybe with an assistant or just some freelancers, we can't afford to do business that way. It's exhausting. It's not sustainable. So where do you begin? So those are some things to look at, where do you actually begin? How do we get started? I'm going to share an example too, but let's talk about a couple ways to think about this. In Happy Little Practice, we work the one thing over and over and over again. And I'm going to bring this all the way to the very end of our time together and give you examples. And here's what I mean. Okay, so as a specialty practice or small business, you're going to have to become known for one thing, at least to invite people through that first initial consultation or first product or sale or consultative experience with you. Okay, it's much easier to say, oh, okay, she or he, they solved this problem or they work with this person. It's so much easier that way, but it does feel unnerving because, right, it rubs up against our own conditioning and training of like help everyone. But that's what our colleagues are for. There's a lot of people who are happy being generalists and other people who want things to be a little bit different. So you want to become known for one thing. It can be that once that person done that one thing with you and resolved that one issue, there's other things you do, but the front of the house, you become known for solving one compelling challenge or maybe a big juicy desire. Okay, so, and you want to think also about one audience, and this will save you so much hours of research, right? For me, like I don't look at stuff for multiple seven-figure CEOs. I look at things that will work for a company of one with a teeny tiny staff or no staff, okay? So, and that wants to work about 25 hours a week, maybe 30 hours, that's it. So that's a very specific person. Very often this is a working parent. Okay, so one audience, not everyone. Think tribes like lawyers or health professionals. Tribes are like groups of people that gather by vocation or some other passion or unique thing. For example, and I always like to look by vocation because in America, that's where we spend most of our time, where we work. So tribes can be small business owners, right, who might have a health challenge. It can be lawyers or other physicians and their cognitive health, or seniors in early retirement. Like, these are tribes of people. And we want to look at solving one solution for them, not six, and certainly not half of a solution, okay? And so the reason for this is, again, if you're wanting to work fewer hours, yet still make really good money and create a really good impact with your clients, you're going to have to get good at one thing. And that one solution may be the first thing that they need to solve before they solve all the other things that that you can do with them, right? So one problem, one challenge, or big juicy desire, one audience, and one solution. And the solution is in the form of your service. So what kind of solution? So you're not going to have 6 different solutions, different service or packages. You're going to start with one. Maybe you'll have a couple tiers, but one way to work with people. Okay. So let's talk about how you can begin to put this together for yourself. All right. This is, you'll take a picture of this or jot this down in your journal or a piece of paper for today. Think of all the things you could help people with. Which is your favorite? Now, when I talk to clients, they're like, well, first I have to let them talk about the should help people with and what their zone of excellence is, and really want to find their zone of genius, like the thing that they like to solve that gives them lots of energy. There are things that you're really good at solving with your clients, but are draining. And we want, for the longevity of your practice or small business, to look for one problem that you can really get behind as your favorite. Okay, like I said before, your audience. Now we want to think, okay, who is already aware of this problem or challenge and would easily and happily pay you to help them solve it, right? This is the clincher. If they are not able to pay you, because for whatever reason, they aren't ready to pay you, they aren't willing to pay you, that's not an ideal audience, right? it is okay if you are a nonprofit, but if you need to make a living, you have to go for an audience that already is aware and is thinking about the thing that you love to solve, like in the middle of the night, early mornings, or while they're driving, like they're thinking about it. And they have some financial means to be able to pay and will happily do so. And then, okay, here's the clincher. How can you, what is the simplest and easiest solution you could start offering? I want to underline this: with little to no infrastructure, right? We love to prepare. We love to get ready. We love to like do our busy work and research and more certifications. How can you start offering a solution to the problem you most enjoy solving without even setting up some fancy website or anything? Because you want to get in the habit and think like an entrepreneur. Even if you are like me and never realized that you were an entrepreneurial in nature, you just started a private practice. I started in nutrition about 23 years ago. And to my surprise, I did not know anything about business or marketing, and I had to figure it out. So we want to get in the habit of having an idea and testing, like sending an email out to the people you know. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. Anybody interested? Reach out and having a conversation with you. Okay, let's do an example. Okay, so the first example, I have one example here. It was a physician. She was a general family practitioner. And we got to know each other, and she said, she kind of whispered to me, my favorites are newborns. I love to work with babies. I'm like, why don't we do that? But, you know, as a medical doctor, she was trained, like many of us here. Well, no, I can't just do that. I have to help anybody that comes to me. And through some coaching, we were able to kind of undo that. And I said, let's just create this new thing for the people who have new babies. And who are those people? New moms. So she was working with anybody in her community that wanted a more holistically minded family practitioner. But in her community, there was quite a few of them. How does she stand out and not compete with them and be in community with them? And so we created a new offer just for new moms who are actively looking for a new family doctor, people who are pregnant. And just put that offer. And I said, don't change anything else with your current clients, and just compare and see what it's like to work with the general population and also your favorite. And it became quite clear to her, like the general population were really like much more draining, required her to do a lot of research because she wasn't a specialist in all the different things and all the random questions they had. Whereas the new moms, like, not only did she not mind looking things up if she had to, like, it was just a joy for her. And so we took her work from hourly serving everyone to being able to refer to anybody else, her colleagues in her community, to just offering a signature program for new moms who are about to have a baby. And once they had their baby and went through that first year of medical care with her, they continued in her practice through a membership. And then she would serve the entire family, but the only way people got into her practice is if you came in there with a baby. And then anybody else that wasn't quite a fit, she was happy to refer to her colleagues, and her colleagues were really quite happy, right? And so we look at her website, we go to her website and you see, welcome new moms. It's not a mystery. When you compare the 2 or 3 other people who are holistic medical practitioners in her area, they're generalists and she's a specialist. So the new moms go to her. And that's just one example, right? It doesn't have to be a physician. It could be a coach. It could be something else. So the takeaway here, I'm going to go into how I do the hourly 25-hour thing in a minute. The takeaway that I would like you to start thinking about is you can make a really good impact without being famous or having an empire, I promise you. By structuring and focusing your talents into one solution that solves one major problem for one audience. And Dr. Jess, she does a lot of different things because her new moms and her kids, they grow up and they grow up in her practice. And so there's lots of things that she gets to do, but the front of the house is just a single point of focus. So what we covered so far, we talked about the concept of chasing big and just really shining a light on something that we often don't even question in our culture, to choosing to do small is the new big. By creating a tiny but mighty boutique business. And we talked about, heads up, 3 things to look out for when trying to go small, but also create big results. You want to look out and make sure you don't do that or pull yourself out of it when you catch yourself there. And we talked about a simple quick start plan, like 3 ways with a pen and paper you can start kind of collecting some data from your own experience, whether you're brand new or you're starting. Okay, I'm going to open the behind the scenes of my own little practice here. Here's my one thing in action. Okay, so I turn an expertise, 70–80% of my clients are health and wellness people, into a boutique business, okay? And then I only work with service-based, mostly health and wellness professionals. The solution is I have a signature coaching program. People can work with me privately, right? And they can work in a small group. You can have more than 1 tier of your signature offer, right? So when I have 25 hours, I don't have the bandwidth to kind of make stuff up all the time. And so everybody kind of comes in and we're all doing the same thing. But guess what? It's never, ever boring because every person's different and it's like a unique puzzle to put together. Here's how I do the 25-hour work week thing, because I know people ask me. I still replicate the one thing approach. And here we're going to do some Q&A in a minute. Okay, so the one thing is, and I teach my clients this, we need one external marketing strategy, the main way that people are going to come into and get to know us and come into our world. And for me, I love to teach. So I just give classes and podcasts and I talk about happy little practice in a variety of different ways. That's all I do. I do one internal marketing strategy and you need one too. And for me, it's my email newsletter. I love to write. So I'm writing once a week, maybe 3 times a month, 4 times a month at most. And those 2 things kind of catch people on both ends, new people, and then the rest of them can get to know me over time if they're not quite ready yet. And there's other ways I invite people to classes and stuff, but these are the 2 main ways, okay? And then how I do my time is I don't bip around to different multiple tasks because it's kind of discombobulating. I time batch. So I have my clients, in 3 days a week in these chunks of time. And that's also when I see potential clients, right? I have speaking slots that I'm just generally doing them when I do them. And I have admin blocks and I have my marketing block that's in about an hour a day. I call it the golden hour. Is something I teach my clients. I do my marketing in an hour a day. And how I can get away with that is I'm not doing 6 marketing strategies. I decide to just go deep instead of trying to be broad, right? In Happy Little Practice, we go deep instead of broad. And 1 week of the month, I have time on my business or time off. So that is when I might schedule car appointments and kid doctor's appointments, or when I'm just thinking, I'm not actually coaching and talking to people, but I'm thinking and working on the business. In the private practice, we need in the business, like when we're working with our clients, but also off, time off, not thinking about it, but also time to just work on. And that's my last week of the month. Not everybody likes it, but to me, as a more introverted person, that really suits me. So this is the Happy Little Practice method. It's happy, and it's including your values, your needs, desires, so you can be well and do well. Otherwise, we can be okay happy working for someone else. And then we do little by a specialty boutique business. And the P in Happy Little Practice is taking your business and really focusing, simplifying, and whatever you do can be replicable. Of course, if you want help with this, you can watch a free class where I go into this for about 75 minutes. I talk more about Dr. Jess. I give you a free book called Rockstars of Wellness when you sign up for that class. And of course, if you are interested in talking with me, there's the link to chit chat with me. Now, in our last 3 minutes here, do you have any questions that you might have? Go for it, Celeste.
We've got 2 that came through. So the first one is, I'm a health coach. How do I convince people the higher rate that I charge is worth it? Okay,
work backwards. Like, make sure that you're choosing a solution, like a problem that is really compelling and not just like, get healthy. It has to be like, get your brain working again so that way you can keep earning for the next 20 or 30 years because you're starting to, your cognitive mind is not working as well. It has to be really specific and compelling. So start there. And then rather than trying to sell like sessions or a package, it has to start with a compelling like problem.
Awesome. Okay, got it. Next question. How do you not feel guilty saying no?
Well, it helps to know what you're saying yes to, right? It helps to have a little bit of a journaling practice or something, and really making sure like the guilt goes away when you know what you're saying yes to. I'm saying yes, like I don't feel guilty about working 25 hours because I'm saying yes to being a really good parent to my children when they get off the bus at 3:00, right? I don't get that perfect all the time, but that's what I'm saying yes to. And so if you take a little bit of time to just realize what's most important to you, it's a little bit what the doctor was saying right before I came on, like really understanding what's important to you and your family. And that may change every few years because of circumstances. And organize yourself around that. It's much easier.
A bit more of an overview. And thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for joining us.
Let me get started here. So first we'll start with what is genomic wellness. So we think a lot about wellness, we think a lot about health, but overall, what is genomic wellness? This is really utilizing the blueprint of your inherent DNA to live your optimal life. So we often thought in the past that maybe we inherit all of these things from our parents, like our height, our hair color, everything from our size to our personalities. But it turns out epigenetics is really just turning the genes on and off in our life. So of course, you're born, you're not necessarily going to be taller or shorter, depending on how you live your life. However, so many other aspects of your life are determined by your environment, your physical and mental well-being, and particularly nutrition and sleep, and really all aspects of your overall lifestyle. So I talk about high performers a lot because this is my client base. So when we talk about high performers, they're kind of a little different than the average person because they have a larger sphere of influence. So I've worked with professional athletes who often have a team of people that assist them. Maybe they have a masseuse, maybe they have a mindset coach like myself, maybe they have a nutritionist or a dietitian on staff at their team or with their trainer. They have a personal trainer. They have a larger group of people around them. And then when you talk about people like executives, they have a larger sphere of influence simply because they're leaders in their space. So they're influencing more people. If they're published authors or they have a podcast, more people are tuning in and listening to what they have to say. So innovators and disruptors in their space, people that are really looking to make a change, these are kind of the client base that I serve. And the way that we really work with these individuals is to make sure that they're functioning in an optimal way each and every day. Because people that are high performers, if they are a professional athlete or they're an executive, they can't show up kind of 50%, right? They have to show up 100% each day, which is just, I think most people find out past the age of about 35 or 40, maybe they make it to about 45. But look at Tom Brady, right? He's still playing. And normally people retire much younger than him, but I think we kind of all have had a peek into his world right now. And he performs so many things. I know he does hyperbaric oxygen chambers. He does nutrition, certainly in line with his genetics. So he would never be able to stay on the field if it weren't for really upregulating all of his environment, everything he puts in and around his body to really be able to perform at his age, which of course is not old, but in his space is considered older. So when you have a space where people can thrive,
you can actually really influence more people. So more people are looking at somebody like Tom Brady and saying, you know what, maybe this does have an impact. Maybe, I think some people will be turned off by not having nightshades, right? But a lot of people are inspired by that, and they can kind of lead the way for wellness in other individuals. So where epigenetics makes an impact, we'll start by looking at physical performance, because it's something that we probably think of most days. You can't really get out of bed without moving your body, right? So upon waking, it kind of starts where your day begins. So living within your genetic guidelines allows for your fluency and your physical performance, even if you're not an athlete, right? Physical performance could just be as simple as doing a yoga class with some friends, or, just packing your kids' lunch and running off to the school bus a little bit late. So really, it could be in everyday events that we need physical performance. We also, in order to work perhaps long hours, or again, to play a sport for a living, you need that physical performance. And without living in the genetic guidelines, it becomes very challenging, because there's greater risk of injury if you don't know what your training parameters are. There's certain SNPs that allow for greater muscle strength, greater muscle power, which in the future, I do see a time where we'll be able to kind of guide individuals into what sport they would be good at playing, or what way that they should move their body. We're already really doing that now. I work with clients to really see how much endurance they can handle, how much sprint they can handle. That's a big one that we look at. And really, sometimes people have elite athlete genes, and they don't get off the couch. So we can utilize that. It also gives people that maybe a little more confidence to move into that space. Like, oh, I actually can become a runner, even if I'm 25 and I never really ran, because it turns out I have this endurance gene and I can run a marathon. And then really kind of just bring in another aspect of physical wellness to their overall wellness. And then we can also look at how medications affect performance. So there's a lot of genes that we look at. For instance, the COL5A1 gene looks at the risk of tendinitis. So if you are more prone to that, we know what nutrients you would need. So whether that be through supplementation or food, to avoid that injury. And then if we know that you have a little more need for soft tissue support, we can look at adding supplementation or just more rest periods in between. I work with people to, particularly when women have bone health issues, if they look at their genetics when they're 30 and realize they need a little more support, it's a very simple addition. It's really just some K2 in the diet, which we just add some kale or some spinach to the diet, and we're kind of really preventing a long-term problem of osteoporosis. So there's a lot of preventative things physically that we can do. And even if you're already, past your prime age of physical health in the way that you are, past professional athlete time, you still are able to then take on a new sport, perhaps find a better fit for where you are now, but also where you can move to. So when we look at genetic testing with medication side effects, a lot of times we can say, well, if you took this medication at full dosage, this could cause some physical performance issues. And then we can really either find an alternative medication or avoid the medication altogether and find a different route for treatment. So the testing is not really a standalone solution, but I like to take into account people's lifestyle. So again, I mentioned the couch potato that maybe has those athletic genes, where they have elite athletic genes. They probably don't want to just jump up and start running marathons the next day, but something like, hey, I can do a couch to 5K program, and then I can move onto the, half marathon eventually. But this physical performance affects even just like let's say an executive in a business. Without the physical capability, but the really endurance isn't there to be able to work in optimal spaces each and every day. So when we personalize a exercise regimen, it's very helpful to know the duration of exercise, what best fits our genetic makeup. So some people are more attuned to high intensity workouts, and then they need a greater deal of rest. Sometimes I can say to people, you actually have inflammation genes that provide you faster recovery. So you're able to avoid injury while still getting in optimal training programs. So next we look at mental performance. This is one of the bigger things that I spend time on because I have most of my clients coming to me complaining that over time they have a little more brain fog, a little more focus issues, or they kind of start forgetting things, and they feel that they're forgetting things at a younger age than that they should. So, people think, well, if I'm older, maybe I would begin to forget things, which isn't necessarily inherent either. But people will come to me and say, well, I'm only 37. How am I forgetting things? But it's really not any early Alzheimer's most of the time. The majority of the time, it really is eating outside of what your body really requires. So if you find that, for instance, my genetics are that I need high fat to be able to have that cognitive function. So, the 90s trend of like the low fat diet would have been very detrimental to me if I followed that, because I would have had brain fog and I would have had a lack of focus, which I can feel if I don't eat enough fatty foods and to include, monounsaturated fats in my diet and things. If the opposite happens, where you eat a very high fat diet, say you were doing the ketogenic diet, which is big, that's pretty trendy right now. A lot of people are giving that a shot, which is great. However, if that's really kind of the opposite of what you should be doing in alignment with your genetics, you may experience that lethargy and kind of sluggishness, either mentally or physically. So the focus is a big thing that I always look at. And it also gives us an idea of memory and cognitive function. So if someone is more prone to depression or anxiety, we can actually see that through neurotransmitter predispositions. So you can get a neurotransmitter test done of your current levels, but this gives us kind of a baseline of where you would probably tend to be. And then using epigenetic modifications, such as higher quality sleep, or maybe if you need something more along the lines of heat therapy or cold therapy, everybody's doing cold plunges right now, might not necessarily be the best thing for you. So it really just depends on those genetics. To be able to increase the memory, you can come up with brain training programs based on where the neurotransmitters may be lower. And then if anybody has that propensity towards anxiety or depression, we can actually avoid certain foods that would trigger that. So we can see if somebody could be triggered with, say, it's called a GAD1 variation. That person could actually be triggered by MSG or artificial flavors to actually feel a little anxious and to have less quality sleep at night. So it keeps you kind of up if you have this bad conversion of glutamate to GABA, and then you won't be able to sleep in the evening. And I have a lot of people, when I explain this in their genetics, it seems to be very common. And when I explain it to people, they're nodding in agreement, like, yes, that's me. It's exactly how I feel. And then when we make those changes, in a matter of just a few days to a week, people feel a really big difference and start sleeping a little more soundly. So by understanding our cognitive strengths and weaknesses, then we can really focus on those stress management techniques, mindfulness practices. I teach a lot of yoga and breathing and pranayama to people so that, so that they can really improve their cognitive function. It does really make a marked difference in research and anecdotally as well. So it is, again, important to note that genetic testing can provide us insight into side effects from medications that would affect our mental performance. So if something, say a sleep supplementation that is not even a prescription, something you could buy at the grocery store, like melatonin, we can see if you're a slow or fast metabolizer of that. So if you were a slow metabolizer, you might wake up groggy and it might run into your following day. And then it can actually lead to depression in a way. So it's helpful to be able to see what those metabolisms are like so that you don't end up supplementing with the wrong medications and or supplements. Go. So these are some of the variants that show our cognitive performance. So we have COMT. You may have heard of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That's the BDNF. Clotho is an interesting gene because not only does it give us a baseline of intelligence, but it also tells us about longevity. So longevity is another huge field of genomics that people find very interesting. And we really talk about healthy longevity. So those with the Clotho gene, it was found in the majority of people that live over 100. And it also shows that a certain variation of it shows greater intelligence. So that's always a fun one to be able to relate to clients. If I say, well, you're smart and you're going to live a long time, people generally like that. So NOS1 refers to nitric oxide, which you might know nitric oxide really has a heart benefit, but it's actually just what kind of keeps the blood flowing through the body, more or less, in simple terms, which really keeps the blood flowing through the brain, which allows us to think just a little faster and a little more clearly. So I'm sure you've all heard of the MTHFR. People will often refer to it as the MTHFR mutation, which is not necessarily true. The MTHFR is really just a genetic variation. But knowing which MTHFR that you have a predisposition for, then we know where we can supplement and what types of folate or folic acid would be acceptable to your body. And then really, if you are able to supplement using the proper supplementation, you might find that your cognitive performance does enhance. So, excuse me, as I mentioned before, that peak mental performance really cannot be obtained. And these are things that I work with my clients, but it cannot be obtained without sleeping within your circadian propensities. So some people are really, really early morning people, but then they're early to bed. And then some people are night owls, and that really is true, but they wake up later. There are differences in sleep length. So sometimes people need 9 hours. Sometimes people need more like 7.5. Now, there are people out there that say, well, I only sleep 4 hours and I don't need more. So that really does account for less than 1% of the population. I still have not met someone with those genetics, but they do exist out there. They're just very rare. So the majority of people that don't sleep 7.5 hours or think that they don't need 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep are probably just incorrect. And then if they did find that they slept within their circadian propensities, they might find deeper sleep. And they'd actually probably find deeper mental performance the following days. And then when it comes to even sleep onset, there's a big difference between someone who falls asleep in 2 minutes and someone that falls asleep in 22 minutes. So somebody that falls asleep within 2 minutes, that might just be due to lifestyle. So what I would work with that person on is becoming less exhausted by the end of the day, perhaps going to bed a little bit earlier, or maybe finding time during the day for more relaxation, more stress management, or even maybe a short nap, a yoga nidra, something along those lines, where those people that fall asleep a little bit longer, some people take up to 30 minutes to fall asleep, which is not a big deal. If you know that you don't feel that frustration of not being able to sleep, and then knowing that that is your part of your circadian rhythm, then you can just go to sleep, get in bed, start your bedtime routine just 20 minutes earlier so that you get a little extra sleep. And then you do meet the parameters that you need to perform. So the proper nutrition for individual genotypes can be, like a 4-hour discussion on its own. It's probably one of the greater things that we spend our time on, but this does come down to really not only the macronutrients, but next would be the micronutrients. So those that are high performers, they might use more choline. They might be, which is kind of used during high intensity workouts. Somebody might need more magnesium for greater rest because of using all of their muscles. And then some other people might need more selenium for detoxification, for exposure to, more pesticides or something in their environment that they can't avoid. So we really target that nutrition profile and then the micronutrient profile to be able to either supplement or find the exact foods that people need to perform at the highest level. So again, the movement through the fitness that's in line with your propensities for recovery, and then providing that support for recovery, whether that's just time or greater stretching needs or that nutrient support. And then there's stress management techniques that are in line with genetics as well. Interestingly, you have a predisposition to cortisol production and metabolism. So when you are a big producer of cortisol, but it has nowhere to go because you're not using it up, that can be kind of detrimental to your nervous system. It actually be quite detrimental to your nervous system. So we are able to go in knowing that, and then be able to mitigate with stress management techniques. There's also the opposite is true, which is that those individuals would be more prone to PTSD. So if those people, excuse me, in a very large study of veterans, those people that had those genetics did experience greater levels of PTSD, excuse me, and the military has, with the stress organization, does have a protocol in place for those people. It's a study right now, but I do anticipate a time where that will be, there will be greater support for those people that have experienced, for instance, PTSD like causing events, and then they're able to really have the right support they need to avoid manifesting PTSD down the line. So another part of peak mental performance is really an environment free of toxins, molds, and other hazards. So we can really look at someone's genetic profile and see where the greater impact is on their specific genetics. So some people are more not necessarily allergic, because everybody's allergic to, for instance, mold, but some people will have greater downstream effects. So that way we can say, hey, this really has to be a priority to make sure that your environment is free of mold, maybe actually get a mold test done. Where if you're a person that has a greater need to avoid heavy metals, then you just really focus on what types of fish you eat and avoid using, certain personal care products that would have heavy metals. And same with plastics. Plastic removal is one of my big, particularly for in the kitchen, that's one of my big go-tos for people. But those with the certain genetic profile, it really does make a difference. And it can kind of clear that brain fog where like people make just that one change, just buy some glass containers or switch from drinking out of plastic bottles. And over time, they do feel a difference. So when we talk about longevity and health, as I mentioned before, longevity is so kind of buzzy right now, right? I know there's a lot of talk about Brian Johnson and his idea to reverse his epigenetic age, but he's taking it to an extreme, right? We can say that's definitely not something that's probably feasible for most people because we simply don't have the resources for that. However, we want to make sure that we're living healthy with that longevity, right? So nobody wants to live 90 years if the last 30 years are not healthy. Excuse me. So we really want to be able to identify any risks in mortality and then make those practical changes to prevent any disease or really anything that would cause us, for instance, like the soft tissue support need. If that's something like that, we really need to focus on spinal health as we age. So really, we can promote those pathways of healthy aging using epigenetic factors, which makes a huge difference in not just extending the lifespan, but also the health span. Because if we're not in good physical and mental health, and we don't have our independence, then longevity is not really serving us. Excuse me. So again, here's a few places where genetic testing provides insight, but we can really get an overall picture of general health and well-being of the individual. When I go through genetics with people, I spend a lot of time asking them questions. How is this manifesting in your life? What does this look like for you? For instance, let's say nutritional needs. Do you eat gluten? Do you avoid gluten? How does it do with you? With neurotransmitters, do you feel like you have days of depression or just moments of sadness, which is normal? With hormones, how do you feel when you get stressed out? Do you feel like more angry at certain times when you're under stress, when you're stimulated from outside stimuli? And then again, the cognitive function and the micronutrients that I mentioned. So when it comes to genetic testing, we really are just talking about predispositions and not actual health outcomes. So this is just what your genetic predisposition is. But again, that's why I discuss with people what exactly we are looking at in their life. So there are, studies of twins are always very interesting, as you may know, that the one twin is in an environment that would, upregulate certain genes, and the other twin is in a downregulation of genes. And what does that outcome look like? So even with same genes, you might have different epigenetics. So different, kind of like moving that dimmer switch up and down based on what you've experienced in your life. So this way we can have our clients really guided towards the positive outcomes. So I like to talk about a towards path instead of an away path. I don't want to scare people away from heart disease. I don't want to scare people away from diabetes. I want them to feel compelled to go towards optimal health, towards feeling cognitively sound into their later years. So I like to focus on more positive outcomes. There is a more medical model that would probably be a little bit more based on avoiding cancers, avoiding, Alzheimer's disease. But I'd like to try to have that towards path because it's just a little bit more empowering to people. A lot of times the direct to consumer genetic testing can be a little scary to people. I have a lot of clients come to me and say, well, I don't really understand this. I don't know how to read this. And now I've been told that I have the genes for this. Does that mean I'm going to get this, said disease? And that's not at all what it is. In fact, this information can be quite empowering because I think a lot of people have probably heard from Thor, right? That he had his genetic test done in ApoE4. So this is a much stronger likelihood of cognitive decline as you age. However, it's not all negative. It gets bad press currently, but it's not all negative. There are not only protective factors, but living within those guidelines, you actually have greater cognitive function in your younger years, and with the right lifestyle, avoiding certain things and bringing in the proper things, such as exercise, the hard things. It's not necessarily a pill, it's exercise, it's quality sleep, it's quality of relationships. All of those things actually allow those people to live longer and with better cognition than the average person that doesn't have that genetic SNP. So technologies that are developing in this space are very interesting. And we have, I know AI is starting to do brain training for people based on genetics. And then when we have a more accurate and a sophisticated assessment of cognitive function, we're able to really see exactly where the brain is moving as we age. So there's going to be a lot more in that space coming soon. And then, of course, gene editing is a whole other thing, but CRISPR is out there, and it is a fact that it's going to be coming into our lives at some point, but hopefully in the most responsible and positive way that we can. So this is how you can contact me. And I just wanted to say that, this is really just an overall view of our health and wellness. And just because we think that we have predispositions that we've maybe inherited from our parents, the majority of those, the vast majority of those, are really preventable just living within your genetic profile. So I urge you to work in conjunction with a holistic health professional or a functional medicine doctor if you wanted to do a deeper dive of your genetics. Simply because the direct to consumer doesn't always give you that whole story. And then you can have actionable information that you can actually put to work in your life. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. See, that was amazing. So interesting. My God. So we have a couple of questions, but we only have very few minutes to answer them. So I'm going to go through these too fast.
Okay.
The first one is, do you work much with reversing clients' biological age?
I do, yes. Not to the extent that, Brian Johnson is currently, but yes, I actually work with a company that tests biological age with the meiotic clock and the Horvath clock. And I actually just redid mine the other day. My epigenetic extrinsic age is 26 and I'm 40. So I work on it quite a bit.
Awesome.
Evidence-based. So I'll try to go through quickly enough to have some questions at the end. Otherwise, please feel encouraged to reach out and contact as we go, or contact me afterward at the molecular integrative oncology. So my emphasis is going to be the evidence-based targeting of cancer molecular networks with natural products, natural health product supplements, and repurposed pharmaceuticals. So let's break that down. Precision medicine, plus integrative oncology. And I apologize, I'm right in the middle of cedar fever in Austin, Texas. Cedar fever is a big thing. We don't have ice snow very often. We have cedar pollen snow. So forgive me for clearing my throat because that's where we are. Precision medicine plus integrative oncology. Well, let's look at what are each of those. Precision medicine is defined by the cancer.gov and the NIH is basically looking at the person's genes, proteins, and environment to prevent, diagnose, and treat disease. And that it's an emerging approach that focuses treatment on the particular individuality, the variability that exists in each person. The basic criteria, the basic dogma of molecular biology is DNA makes RNA makes protein. Called DNA is transcribed into RNA and RNA is translated into protein. But the thing to remember is DNA in the nucleus makes these bits of RNA and RNA then goes out of the nucleus and then zip goes through a little bioprinter called a ribosome that makes protein. So DNA makes RNA makes protein. And that's what we're looking at is that subject of those functions. DNA study is genomics, the RNA study is transcriptomics, and the protein study is proteomics. So that's where we're aiming. Whenever anyone talks about precision medicine, that's what they're talking about, is how to have medications aim at one or another or many of those components. Integrative oncology is a subset of cancer treatment which looks at the person's individual composition, and that using, in addition to conventional treatment, natural health product supplements and repurposed pharmaceuticals. In other words, pharmaceuticals that are already on the market, already approved by the FDA to be marketed, and that the physicians have access to, and that those drugs can be repurposed for other reasons other than what the FDA has approved them. And that's a very common practice in the USA and Canada and various other parts of the world. And that repurposing in oncology treatment, oncology doctors repurpose oncology drugs, so chemotherapy drugs and the targeted precision oncology biologic drugs about 30% of the time. So it's a very common practice. What they don't do is repurpose the non-cancer drugs where the researchers in cancer research have identified that non-cancer drugs like antibacterials, antifungals, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, proton pump inhibitors, statin drugs, a whole range of anti-diabetic drugs, a whole range of primary care pharmaceuticals that primary care doctors, family doctors, internal medicine doctors, other primary care doctors use, but that those can be repurposed for their anti-cancer molecular activity. And then if you combine these two, precision medicine and integrative oncology, that's where the field of molecular integrative oncology has been defined. That's where it's now arisen. So that's what we're looking at, is how do we take the evidence base that's available, and the evidence base means the scientific articles that have been published, and the ones that I focus on are the ones that are published through PubMed. PubMed is the main portal for the biomedical research that's indexed. Think of it as the electronic card catalog at the front of the library. It's not all the articles, it's not all the books, it's the electronic card catalog, or the digital card catalog, that gives access to where all those are around the world. And that right now there's about 32 million entries in that PubMed index. So everything that I'm talking about comes out through the PubMed portal. When you combine precision medicine and integrative oncology, that's the new field of molecular integrative oncology. And it uses the patient's particular data about any DNA, RNA, or protein data, plus the data that's in the evidence base about those particular cancer cell types, and then applies that using the evidence base that shows that natural products and repurposed pharmaceuticals have anti-cancer molecular effect in those cancer cell types and against those particular adverse mutations or alterations that are displayed. It's important to understand the big picture. There are common characteristics that exist in cancer called the hallmarks of cancer. And for about 20 years, we've looked at these 10 main characteristics. And if you look in the literature, go into the science articles about the hallmarks of cancer, what you'll see is this diagram. And I find it really a bit complex, a bit overwhelming. Let's break it down. Every one of these pictures, every one of these icons, these graphical icons, is associated with an associated characteristic called the hallmark, and that it's still complex. And so to make it a little more simple, what I've done is opened this graphic into a table, and then each one of those features are translated into a more user-friendly description. So DNA mutates and becomes unstable. There's an alteration in metabolism in the cancer cells that is very characteristic. And the cancer cells start growing, the signaling inside of them to grow is all the time on, and the ability to turn it off has been eliminated. And so they just keep growing. They resist the normal, automatic programmed recycling or the automatic programmed cell death. And there's relentless replication that then accumulates this lump of cells that then cultivate the growth of their own blood vessel supply to bring them oxygen, to bring them nutrients, to release and remove waste products. And that those cells also, the cancer cells, accumulate immune system cells that are used to feed and grow and protect the cancer cells from being identified and eliminated by the good anti-cancer component of the immune system. Therefore, the cancer lump or the tumor is able to avoid immune destruction. And along the way, at any point in time in this circuit of activity, the cancer cells can loosen their attachment to each other and release and go to another location that's called metastasis. But also, because they don't turn off their growing signals, they don't have that sensitivity to turn off the growth activity. When they hit a margin of an organ, they just keep going and can invade into another organ. So that basic overview of what's going on you can see that in this sequential representation of how to understand the hallmarks. Just briefly went through that right now. I'm trying to give that overview of where we are in understanding cancer. In regular cancer treatment, the drugs are called targeted biologics. These are the new precision oncology drugs or chemotherapy, and they can target each of the hallmarks of cancer. And here are some examples of the types of drugs that can target each of the hallmarks of cancer. Interestingly, when you look in the literature, natural product supplements, when you find particular ones, they can also target each of the hallmarks of cancer. And that repurposed primary care drugs, which are not approved by the FDA for marketing as anti-cancer drugs, so primary care pharmaceuticals also can target all of the hallmarks. So this opens up a very important set of options, a very important resource for anti-cancer treatment in addition to the conventional treatment. But how do we do it? We need to target the molecular pathways and molecular networks in cancer cells, also cancer stem cells. And because cancer cells recruit and induce the relocation of a bunch of different types of cells, blood vessel cells, immune system cells, a whole range of cells into the microscopic environment immediately adjacent to the cancer cells, those cells are called the tumor microenvironment cells. So we need to be able to target all of those and the molecular networks associated with it. So what I want to show here is a representation. This is the main cancer molecular network that is the most referenced, the most research citations. It's called the Kyoto Encyclopedia of Genes and Genomes Pathways in Cancer Map. And if you look here, you can see some of the hallmarks that I was just describing, that the cancer cells make their own blood vessel supply. They avoid and are resisting automatic program cell death or automatic program, I call it automatic program cell death or automatic program cell recycling. And that's normal, healthy activity. And the cancer cells are avoiding that. Technically, it's called evading apoptosis, or the unstable DNA or the mutated DNA or that lack of ability to turn off the growing signals. And this is a map that shows a range of these hallmarks. It doesn't show all of them. We have to go to a bigger map to show the maps of the tumor microenvironment, for instance. And we'll notice that there are a number of pathways of activity. So molecules, each one of these indicates a molecule that's then communicating activity next to the next molecule. So this molecule signals this molecule, or this molecule signals this molecule. You'll see it in a cascade, a molecular cascade. The molecule gets immediately adjacent to the other molecule, causing a change in shape, a change in function. Sometimes they bind together, sometimes they break apart. When they change shape, that can cause a change in function. And then it goes to the next molecule and the next molecule into a sequence, a pathway. It's called a molecular pathway. And that here's a list of that same map showing the molecular pathways. And they have a bunch of unfamiliar type names. It doesn't matter what the names are right now. It's just to understand that these are the labels of those pathways, kind of like the labels on a highway shows you, okay, well, that's how you can identify that on a map and how you can navigate through that. Here's how you can navigate through these molecular pathways. And if we looked right here at this blood vessel growth and the molecular pathway that's most identified with the induction or the creation of blood vessels for cancers, that we use this as an example, that the pathway is called VEGF pathway, VEGF signaling pathway. And that's associated with that hallmark of the developing the blood vessels. But then look here, there's more than one of these pathways that are coming into that characteristic, that feature, that development of blood vessels. And that identifies very importantly that even though the most common, the biggest main pathway associated with it is called VEGF, that VEGF pathway is not the only one. It's a network of pathways that contribute to that feature. And the dotted lines here indicate that there are multiple pathways underneath that. That's essentially showing you this version. If we were to zoom in more into the map, we would see that there's a whole range of additional pathways that participate in each one of these dotted line pathways. And so the point here is we're dealing with a molecular network on all of these hallmarks or all of these characteristics. And that by definition, we're having to understand and manage molecular networks in cancer cells, in cancer stem cells, and tumor microenvironment cells. Here's that map, the main pathways in cancer map with everything filled in at this high level view. But what do you do with that? How do you prioritize targeting? And that had a big boost in understanding about 4.5 years ago when the Pan Cancer Atlas, which is an atlas, is a resource of maps, and the Pan Cancer Atlas came out with a prioritization of pathways in order to identify, well, where do we aim? And that, what I'm going to show you is that after it was about a decade's activity of hundreds of scientists, that they looked at many thousands of cancer cells and looked for what are the alterations, what are the molecular changes that are associated with those cancer types, in order to be able to drive for researchers and for clinicians where to aim their treatments and where to combine treatments, how to combine treatments. And that was a great step forward. And here is that map. It's called the Flagship Paper Pathways of the Pan Cancer Atlas. And it's still a little overwhelming, especially when you fill in all the molecular targets or the molecular addresses associated with it. So in order to make it easier for me to understand, I animated the map. So here's a particular molecular pathway associated with the feature called proliferation. So growing, dividing, accumulating, growing, dividing, accumulating, and cell survival and protein production. And this molecular cascade, this molecular sequencing of the signaling, every one of these molecular addresses or targets is a potential actionable alteration, meaning it can have an anti-cancer therapeutic option, that some drug or natural product can be used to target the molecular activity of that molecular site in an anti-cancer direction. And you'll notice in each one of these that there are features or characteristics identified in those pathways. And importantly, if I go fast forward through here, the feature which I think is most important, they're all connected. So this is a network of networks. And that's really important to understand, that because cancer cells are adaptable, they can compensate for adverse circumstances, just like healthy cells. So if you use a drug that targets a particular molecular site, the cancer cells can adapt their signaling around that. Think a main highway in which now a roadblock is put in and the traffic can work its way around it. That's what we're talking about in a molecular sense. And importantly, when you look at, I'm going to show 4 supplements, 4 natural product supplements that are very common. Curcumin from the root spice called turmeric, which is widely researched. Every yellow dot on this flagship paper pathway map, every yellow dot is where in the scientific literature, researchers have shown anti-cancer molecular effect at that molecular site. And so the idea here is curcumin can target any of these 44 different molecular sites that are identified on this map. Now, actually, there are many, many more molecular sites available that curcumin can also target, but on this highly selected map, the Pan-Cancer Atlas map, that this is the fundamental value of natural products is they are inherently multi-targeted. So the concept here is that if you could get 44 curcumin molecules into a cell, that theoretically you could target 44 different molecular interactions. And that's of great value because the cancer cells are adapting and not all cells are identical because the DNA is mutated and unstable, that the progeny downstream grow, divide, accumulate cells, that they're not 100% identical to the upstream parental cells. And that's called tumor heterogeneity. You have groups of cells that are different. That means the molecular vulnerabilities in the cells in the cancer are different. And so being able to target multiple molecular sites with therapeutic agents is of great value. And then when the cancer cells are attempting to adapt, to work around an adverse change so that now a drug that blocked a particular pathway, the cancer cells are now developing resistance to that by signaling around it. The natural products having multi-targeted activity can impede or inhibit or decrease the development of that resistance, another great value. The greatest limitation in natural products is they have a very low therapeutic index or very low therapeutic impact on their own by themselves. And so what the literature shows, and I'll demonstrate that going forward here, is that combining them in an overlapping synergistic way can provide therapeutic value greatly available at doses that are tolerable. So here's a next molecule, green tea extract. You'll see the green dots here, and there are 28 green dots throughout this flagship paper pathways map. And notice right here at this part, green tea, curcumin, green tea, curcumin, that the green tea and the curcumin can target the same molecular addresses in the same anti-cancer direction. And the idea here is that and it's demonstrated in the literature that curcumin can be synergistic with green tea. And when synergy occurs, the amount of each of the therapeutic agents required to get the same effect can be drastically reduced, can be reduced more than by half, can be reduced by 10 times, can even be reduced by 100 times. So 1 to 2 orders of magnitude value by overlapping the therapeutic agents. Look down here, the curcumin targeting these 2 addresses or molecular sites, and the green tea targeting these 2. And so combining them, now we get more molecular network targeting plus the synergy. So there's great value in looking at the literature of how to combine these. If we look at 2 more, genistein from soybeans, the pink dots here. Genistein is so widely researched that for decades, it was a standard in the cancer research literature, compared with which new items were compared. And then resveratrol, grape extract, or from Japanese knotweed and others. Most importantly, when we combine these 4 items, look here at this map. Everywhere you see multicolored dots is an opportunity for overlapping therapeutic anti-cancer synergy. Evidence-based molecularly network targeted. And that this is the great value of natural products, is combining them. If I show the repurposed pharmaceuticals, which we don't have time for, it can also add to this. And so the same information being shown here in the column. The first column is all those targets. Everywhere you see a row that has more than one check mark is an opportunity for overlapping therapeutic anti-cancer synergy. This all became validated in the research literature in the December of 2015 in a very high impact mainstream conventional cancer journal that put out a special issue about a broad spectrum design for cancer treatment and prevention. And that they looked at each one of the hallmarks. And what I'm showing you here is the articles, each one of the hallmarks. And there was a group of scientists that did this project. It took them 3 years to do this project. And in that project, what they did was look at all the hallmarks separately. And of those groups of scientists looking at various hallmarks, they came to the conclusion that it's a rational approach to use a broad spectrum of natural products and repurposed pharmaceuticals in addition to conventional oncology treatment. And a group came from that research affiliation that's now seeking to do clinical trials, and that looking at how do you apply a broad spectrum of natural products and repurposed pharmaceuticals. And I was recruited onto that board, and we have gone to the FDA. The FDA has given notification that they would give us waivers because we're not trying to get any particular drug approved to be marketed. Instead, we're looking at, well, how can we compare people who are getting all best conventional treatment to people getting all best conventional treatment plus the molecular integrative oncology in addition to their all best conventional treatment. And I've been doing this with my own patients since the late 1990s, early 2000s. And so that's why I got recruited onto this board. We have gotten no funding because the idea of doing the comparison without trying to find a new drug to be approved, hasn't been any backers. So if anybody is interested or knows some organization that would be supportive for research, then please contact me. So the final slide here is that there are benefits for natural products and repurposed pharmaceuticals. We could target the molecular networks, synergistic anti-cancer activity. It's rational, it is in the evidence base. It has a relatively high margin of safety. Nothing is zero risk, but it's a very manageable risk, and that these items are immediately available, that patients don't have to wait for years for the research to be brought to market. There are limitations, the low absorbability, the low therapeutic impact, and that these are not standardized out on the market, and people have to go and get all of these things themselves, and that because these are not patentable molecules, we don't have clinical trials. So I appreciate your time and the opportunity to share this information. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, either directly by phone to my office, or you can go through the website, LavalleeMDprotocols.com. Looking at the questions.
Dr. LaValle, thank you so much. We are out of time, unfortunately.
I feel like I'm kind of going to repeat some similar stuff with my colleagues, which they have mentioned before. So it was really nice to see all these experts and opinions. Actually, I feel we are quite connected. We should do something all together. So
Definitely. Well, it's all such great information, you know what I mean? And it all is all, I think when you get past the pharmaceuticals and into the next level of health and wellness and natural products and things like that, it is all connected. You know, there's so much to it, but it is all connected, and that's what it's all
Yeah,
about.
actually, it's quite new, you know. People are, I mean, so far, not all people are into prevention or into, let's say, natural medicine. Most people think that a pill will be much more effective. And you know what? I mean, it's easier to take a pill to lower your blood pressure than doing sport and taking care of your diet, making lifestyle change. So people just prefer the easier way. So that's the problem. I think we need, it's more educational. We need to educate people how to live rather than think all people know that smoking is not good, that sport is very important. But you know, so far the mentality, even the public health, this is I would say it's more governmental work to encourage people and educate people how to live. So this is, I think, is our mission. Me and all my colleagues, we share the same goal. So okay, I think we are running out of time, so I will try just to share it. I'm talking from my mobile phone. Let me share it. Okay, let me see. Probably I should do it like that. Can you see my screen,
We can
guys?
only see like a portion of it. So we see
Right.
like a vertical. There we go. Well, that's a little bit, but there we go. Now you've got it. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Right. So we just post it like here. So, like you mentioned, my name is Siwer. I'm specialized in therapeutic fasting. I'm a nutrigenomic specialist. For people who haven't heard about that, it's kind of new field. Nutrigenomic is the diet gene interaction, how the diet can influence our genetic expression. What does genetic expression means? That you can burn certain genes like high blood pressure or cholesterol. So that doesn't mean diet will eliminate these genes. The genetic expression means that will make these genes kind of sleeping. You will turn off the genetic expression. So by the lifestyle change, you can modify the expression of these genes. So you could have, you need to take care, like for example, you need to take more care of your diet so you can lower your risk of having cardiovascular diseases and so on. I have also created something called travel therapy, which is quite interesting, let's say, concept. I have developed it 5 years ago, with focus on mental health, cardiovascular diseases, longevity, and cancer. So I will share at the end of this presentation my thoughts with this focus. Although in the recent year, all my, let's say, focus has shifted to mental well-being and longevity. Okay, so what is fasting? Let's first talk about fasting. What is fasting? Fasting is the absence uh, of some or all food and beverage. It could be for therapeutic or spiritual reasons. Okay, there is a lot of benefits of fasting. The high potential fasting benefits are into promoting the ketogenesis, hormone modulation. It reduces the oxidative stress, which means you can have longer life. Inflammation. Most of people right now, everybody suffering from inflammation. Let me say just here a quick tip. Do you know that people die? People with high cholesterol don't die from the cholesterol itself. The recent evidence and study shows that inflammation is the reason of all the diseases. So you need to take care of the inflammation. You need to lower the inflammation. It's increased the stress resistance, lipolysis, and also the autophagy, which is I'm going to talk about into that in a minute. The therapeutic fasting can't be done by everyone so easy. It should be, but there is the clinical practice and focus should be on personalized nutrition and on personalized nutrition intervention strategies. So it can't be like that by itself. So what are the benefits? We can see it here. What are the main benefits? It's improved the heart function. It reduced the insulin resistance. Most people right now eat a lot of junk food, and because of the stress, they have a very high insulin resistance. I think this is quite chronic and common problem for most of the people around the world. Also, it helps to prevent cancer. So as I mentioned at the beginning, our focus should be on prevention. It's to promote weight loss, reduce oxidative stress and inflammation, and it boosts brain function. That's very important point. A lot of people have this foggy, this foggy brain. They can't focus. So, so fasting will help to reduce these symptoms and for sure improve your brain function on all levels, prevent Alzheimer and other neuro diseases. So I'm going to explain very quickly how is the process of fasting. So physiologically, the fasting consists of the catabolism of lipids, protein, and carbohydrate in the blood glucose. So in the first, after you fast for overnight, let's say 12 hours, the main dominant source of plasma is glucose, which is in your liver. So if you have a fatty liver, you can get rid of this fatty liver by fasting. Like glycogen, after like 48 hours, your pyruvate and lactate come as the main source for your muscles. A lot of people also think that when you fast, you're gonna lose your muscle. In reality, what you're gonna lose are the let's say the broken muscle or the tissue, the dead tissue in reality, and the ketones start to produce in our body gradually. Ketones will also help you if you guys have any kind of autoimmune disease. Ketones will be very helpful because it will lower also your inflammation. One tip could also be adding vitamin D. For sure, vitamin D should be taken with fat because it's a liposoluble vitamin. Should be taken with probably teaspoon or spoon of olive oil or coconut oil, for example. I'm going to talk a bit about autophagy. So what is autophagy? Auto is self, and phagomy means to eat. So autophagy is a kind of recycling for the damaged cells in your body. So you will get rid of all, as I said, these dead tissue and also broken muscle that you have. It will also prevent you and improve any kind of pathogen that you might have in your cell, like viruses and bacteria. Before going to the recommendation, let me okay. So who can let me see. So who can fast? Not everyone can fast. I mean, if you are underweight, for sure. If you PMI is under 20, you can fast. Children can fast. Pregnant, people with a very dangerous and chronic disease, cardiovascular disease, or people with a certain type of diabetes. We need first to see their analytics and make sure how is their medical condition before being approved into this therapeutic fasting. My recommendation, like fasting can't be done so quickly. Fasting should be going gradually. You can imagine if you are very addicted to sugar and junk food. I tell you, you need to do 1 day fasting, water fasting. Think you're gonna die directly. You need to introduce people like step by step. So one of the best ways would be the intermittent fasting, like the 18 hours fasting, water fasting, 6 hour feeding hour. It will also be quite effective, as our colleague mentioned before, for people with chemotherapy. There are certain stuff, for example, people at 8 a.m. in the morning, they might have a very high cortisol. You might have, if you make a blood, let's say, analysis, you will have very high cortisol and glucose. So if you do light sports, walking, that will be quite effective. You might have a high LDL. So that's because the cellular membrane will be healing. And then you need to take care a lot of your electrolytes. Some of people have told me that they suffered from tachycardia. That could be because of the imbalance of their electrolytes. So make sure to have a quite good amount of sodium, magnesium, and potassium. So what is travel therapy? I'm just going to change this. Okay. So what is travel therapy? Travel therapy is a concept. Can you guys see me? I can't see myself actually. I'm like talking. I feel I'm talking with myself.
Yeah, yes, we can. We're good.
Okay, good. So what is travel therapy? Travel therapy, it's a concept that I have developed 5 years ago. It's a mix of traveling to a destination, could be anywhere around the world, Mallorca, Malta, Florida, the Caribbean countries, with focus on people who suffer from chronic stress or from cardiovascular diseases or for weight management. So it's a mix of traveling to a new destination where we do personalized nutrition, physical activity, could be hiking, swimming, and the most important thing, that we will be teaching people how to live. A lot of people don't even know how to live. So in 1 week, obviously, you won't have all your health biomarkers changed. So this kind of travel therapy, it's a kind of, you go, you have a new experience, see a new place. For sure, you need to get a lot of vitamin D supplementation. So sun and vitamin D supplementation will be very helpful to improve people, let's say, to improve people's mental well-being. I have done these programs for people who suffer from a lot of stress, like surgeons, medical doctors, company owners. So one of my, let's say, my goals is to have my own center. So I do these programs, like I travel to different destination, I implement it for a small group of people or for one person, for example. But my goal is to have my own retreat center. And after a while, like last year, I was a consultant in an immunotherapy company in Spain, where I was doing the personalized nutrition programs for cancer patients. So I have come with the concept of having our immunotherapy center, where we combine the immunotherapy for cancer patients with personalized and precision nutrition or medicine. So this kind of programs, we will improve, let's say, people's antigen to detect cancer in more effective way, and at the same time we work on the nutritional and, let's say, on the psychological part. So all in all, it will improve their probability to survive from cancer, along with therapeutic fasting, for sure. So if you guys like the concept, I'm sure we could have a really nice team, and it will be stronger, especially if you're gonna pitch in front of investors. This center, if I would ever have it, could be my ideal place would be in Spain, Mallorca, but also it could be anywhere in the States. And I feel like in the States, people are more into these alternative and cell therapy strategy rather than Europe. People in Europe, they are still they prefer these kind of pills and so on. And yeah, that's all. If you have any question, guys, feel free to contact me. I'm very active on social media, actually. I'm on TikTok. I do a lot of videos about health and nutrition, and also on Instagram and on LinkedIn.
Siwar, thank you so much. So we do have a question here. Does the 16-8 work for fasting as well? Then does it work as good or no? The 16 hours fasting, 8 hours eating.
Well, I mean, the more you fast, obviously, it's much better. But it's not easy to answer the question. Depends on their weight, on their condition, but won't be bad. I mean, it's good as long as it's let's say it's a part of your lifestyle. So it's good. If she can't do it longer hour, if she can push it with time, let's say 1 hour more and then 2 hour, I think it would be much better.
Okay.
But it works as well.
Right. Okay. Another question. Do you have to fast every day, or can you take a cheat day on fasting?
I mean, cheat. Listen, when we talk about healthy lifestyle, that doesn't mean you will never ever have a chocolate or sugar. I myself, if I want, I can have a piece of cake or whatever. So it's okay. The difference here, if your diet is based on sugar, and if you take it one day, so no problem at all. I mean, we are human.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, well, that is what we have. Thank you so much. And once again, what is the easiest way for people to contact you?
So you can reach me out on my website, agewellretreat.com. You can also see me on LinkedIn, Siwar Ala, same as my name. And as I said, if you Facebook, on Instagram and on TikTok, if you write Siwar, Dr. Peace, because I write Dr. Peace because as my focus have shifted into mental well-being, so it's like Dr. Peace sounds very nice.
Yes.
Siwar Health. If you write Siwar Health or even Siwar Travel Therapy, you will see a lot of videos about me, and I do it in 5 languages. So
wow.
probably you're gonna. I need to focus more on the English one. I'm focusing more on Kurdish, Arabic, and Spanish. That's why my followers are all over the world, but most of them are from the States and Latin America, actually.
Lovely. All right. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you for.